My name is Timothy Stewart. I am 50 years old. I am an actor, director, writer, choreographer. I'm a member of the Pollard Theatre Company, and I'm an artist.
Timothy Stewart. I am so glad, my friend, my very dear friend, that we are sitting down to do this, although to some, it will come as no surprise that it's a little bit with kicking and screaming before all this happened.
Yeah, it's going to be your most difficult interview.
that I was certain of from the beginning, which is which is why we held it till now. We've talked about this a ton. You and I feel like we are brothers who grew up in very, in different households across the state, but very much the same. A single mom, at some point, working. We have one sister each. We're lucky to be exposed to art early on. But I want to talk about, your origin and clarify a little bit of that story for the folks listening. So tell us about growing up Timothy Stewart.
Well, actually, mom and dad didn't get a divorce until I was in grad school. So,
Right.
we were just the 50s nuclear family is what I always say. We were mom and dad, 2 kids, and a dog. Just little happy life in the suburbs of Choctaw, Oklahoma. So nothing. I played Little League. My sister was piano and gymnastics and just did our lives.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about the paths as kind of the paths that we found ourselves on, which I guess is where we found that common ground. But you very different than I. I always talk about when I see your pictures from your elementary and high school. I was like, you were Alex P. Key, man. You were what will I do, baby?
Yeah.
You were.
I was, I guess, that preppy look, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I had my moments of wild shirts and sweaters and the Bill Cosby sweaters.
God.
I had a bunch of those. That was my outlet of creativity until I really found theater. I saw my first play, I guess it was, in 7th grade. Teacher, Mrs. Calhoun, took a bunch of us to see a show. I don't even remember what the play was or what it was, but I just knew that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And it wasn't until my freshman year that I actually did my first show, and that was The Wizard of Oz. And didn't you play the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz?
I did.
Yep. Living parallel lives.
I full disclosure, I played the Tin Man in The Wiz in elementary school, and it was back in those days when my mom actually kind of helped create the theater program at my elementary school, and it was literally like she's sitting at the television watching the show over and over and over again. I said, no, he says this, and so she'd write that down, and that would become part of our script. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, all the people who were involved in the licensing for The Wiz. I've learned since, though, we're not supposed to do
that. Yeah, copyrights.
Yeah. Who knew that was a thing?
Yeah.
So you were introduced, but what, as far as the introduction to the arts, was there much art in your home? How did that?
Not theater. I was the first one in our family really to go into theater. My mom is an artist in aspects of, she paints from oil paintings to currently she's China paints, and so we have dishes with every variation of a flower on it. None of our dishes match. So
awesome.
She'll get tired with one, but that was the only aspect of the arts that was in our family. My sister, my mom also played the piano, but it was more of the kid takes the piano lessons,
right?
And I never had that, but I was in Little League.
Yeah.
So I didn't know much about the arts growing up until I went into it.
Kind of found them
Yeah.
through your freshman year. And because, I mean, you did a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong, you did a lot of, obviously anybody who knows this, knows this. You're highly organized. You're very, civic minded. So you were kind of student council kid or, Future Leaders of America kind of kid.
I was, vice president of our class and, president of the National Honor Society, voted most spirited. I know those who know me now know I'm spirit. Yeah. My spirits now come in a bottle.
No comment from me, brother.
So yeah, and I was in, I don't know if there was a drama club, but we had drama classes, and that was the club.
So much of that was like you weren't set on this path really early on, but then you come into contact with the show as a freshman, and you that kind of was the really early onset of, okay, that's what I want to do. Talk to me about that, because it's such a very unique story, especially particularly for our audience that maybe they come into it later than others. You don't have this whole history of it. In fact, you're playing sports. You're very engaged in other extracurricular activities, and yet you hit this mark as a freshman and kind of go, wait a minute, that might be something that's right up my alley. What I know you don't. I don't know if
I don't know if it ever came into my mind of this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. Right. I knew it was something that I wanted to do and wanted to, be a part of. Right. I played sports in my junior high, basically football, basketball, and baseball. And it wasn't until really high school that I got more into theater and realized that was where I wanted to go. I had to play sports my sophomore year just to fulfill my requirements in health and education or whatever. And then it wasn't until my junior year that I was able to focus directly into the drama classes and theater and acting classes in high school. So
do you remember doing anything in high school, any show that you were in, any place where you just kind of went, oh God?
Of course. We did a play called Voices from the High School, which is a very episodic show that a lot of high schools do. And, so it's like 1-2 person scenes, monologues, stuff like that. So everyone in the class could have a role and have a part. Right. And then, we did Grease. Sure. And I played Roger Rump, the mooning champ of Rydell High. And then we did Fame, and I played Mr. Sharovsky, and that was sort of my, I'm the big guy who can play old Jewish men in high school. And that sort of set me on the path of being a character actor.
Yes, it did. Yes,
when you're not the chiseled, good-looking guy, you don't get the leads. You move into character parts, and honestly, I was okay with that. There's times it's like, hey, I want to be that one, but the characters get the fun parts and just the fun of it all. Being not you, and not having to be, and not having to be good looking.
I think that there are multiple people who would disagree with you on that point. My mother being, most easily referenced among them. Oh, he's so good looking.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you a little bit about, because you're doing all this from Choctaw, Oklahoma. You're going to Choctaw High School, and you're coming to the end of your high school career, having laid this foundation for Timothy Stewart, the character actor. And at this point, you're kind of discovering your talents for the stage, where you'd been you'd been aware of your athletic talents as well as your academic talents. What are you
I wouldn't
discovering?
call my athletics talents.
No?
Yeah. I mean, I did okay in sports, but
Mhm.
you know, I was no jock.
Gotcha.
So
Well, what are you discovering as your artistic talents at this point? You know that you're capable of playing the older roles.
yeah. And I also enjoyed writing and comedy. I was a TV junkie and still am, and I watched every sitcom that good or bad. I would just watch it.
Mhm.
There would be a time where, you know, you get the TV guide and I'd memorize it on Sunday. And so when we'd lose it throughout the week, someone wanted to know what was on TV, I would know
Wow.
because, you know, that's just who I am.
That's a
I was
specific skill set.
a Rolodex of useless information. um, and so I remember watching Lily Tomlin and because just a lot of the sitcoms of the era.
Mhm.
Um, and through a monologue that I saw Lily Tomlin do, that inspired me to write one of my probably more popular monologues, which is Elmer, which is a young kid who's addicted to glue.
Hmm.
And so, and I used that one to perform. You know, I auditioned with it for like Quartz Mountain in high
Okay.
school and stuff like that. Um, and I think I even used it for like a college audition. So I the humor and the storytelling of writing um, began in high school too. So
Really?
it wasn't just the acting aspect. I like to tell the story and pretend and be other characters and mainly make people laugh and have
Right.
fun.
Right.
And so
And you hold on to that now. I mean, you obviously, and we'll talk a little bit more about your writing, but you've always been kind of drawn to the experience of building a thing from the ground up. We'll talk about
yeah.
some of the projects you worked on, um, but you're shaping this early kind of foundation of what your career is going to look like, and you're making decisions about what's going to happen after high school. Take us through the process of choosing OSU.
Um Really, it was just an in-state university. I don't know why I decided to stay in state. Maybe it was financial, maybe it was just I didn't really have the drive to go off to a big city or anything like that. And still don't. I mean, I enjoy working at the Pollard in the aspect of we're a small company that does good work. Um, we don't have the financial backings of uh, a Broadway theater house, but we're still able to do good work, and I like that aspect. And also, I'm close to home and my family. If something arises, I can be there if
Right.
at a moment's notice. So I don't have to, book a flight and make my way back. Um, so I guess OSU was one that AI auditioned for and got in. I think one thing that I really liked about the program at OSU was that it was small enough that even as a freshman, I got stage time.
Right.
I didn't have to wait until I was a junior or a senior. You could be one of the ones that have a good, juicy role or just stage time in general. Um, and yet it wasn't so small that we were limited to the types of productions we could do.
Right.
And from high school through OSU and then grad school, I have been very fortunate to have an incredible array of talented and caring and nurturing teachers and professors and instructors who always encouraged you. Um, and they would teach you their aspects. And then as an actor, you pick and choose what works for you.
Right.
So,
Amongst other faculty members, you had obviously Peter Westerhoff, who was able to kind of was the head of performance from 85, I think, to 2018. And he'd worked, in addition to doing multiple productions at OSU, he directed and choreographed for Connecticut Rep. He'd worked and choreographed in Ohio, Indiana, New York State, Massachusetts, and New York City. He directed the Kennedy Conspiracy play. So I want to talk a little bit about your experience and some of your influences at Oklahoma State to begin with. But let's start with Peter.
Peter was, I'm fortunate enough that all of my professors were also someone that I even now consider friends. So they were nurturing in a way, and, he taught tap classes and the movement, and he directed a lot of the musicals. And so that really taught me how to stage and the basics of doing a musical in itself. On the other side, we also had Tracy Callahan, who was my instructor there, and she, put me in roles that were a little more meaty. Leon Schwab and Voice of the Prairie, and stuff like that. So I had that nice balance of Peter and Tracy, who would two different styles, but together they gave me a very good basics to developing my own personal acting style and even directing style of looking at not only the spectacle but the inner workings and just creating a character.
You bring up a point, and I want to kind of highlight it a bit, because you talked about they helped you develop a personal style, which one of the things I've kind of learned about that program in the time that you were there is that they weren't creating a cookie cutter program for every student. They were building a program where the individual students could develop their own skills, and more to the point, could develop a way of thinking about the art as opposed to reproducing the art they'd seen. Which gave you an individual style of all your own. You're a very different director than the other people you've come into contact with. Heck, you're a very different director than the people in our building. And I think that's such an important point that I'd like you to talk about a little bit, is that why is it important to learn to learn who you are as an artist, and how did OSU shape you in that?
Well, as I believe, like with everyone, you're going to come across so many different directors and scene partners that they work one way and you work a different way, and you're always going to have to find that way of meshing the two to make the production work. I've been in shows where you have that very technical director who you walk over here, you pick up the phone on this line and you turn your head 30 degrees to the right, or whatever. And then you have the ones it's like, just find it internally. And even now, I don't have a specific way of saying, this is how I'm going to find this character. I don't know until I come across it. Sometimes the character comes inward and out, and then sometimes it's a way this character walks that is your basic. It's you find whatever spark that you can, that's going to help you find the character. Any path, I'm not going to say that's the wrong answer, because you don't know what the right answer is until you start playing.
Right.
And that's why it's called to play.
Right. That's one of your most common phrases. It's a play, so play. And you do, you and I have talked about this internally. You've directed me several times. I've directed you several times. It's a new experience every time we sit down to work together. The experience of building Passing Strange was a very different experience than building Ragtime. Now, some of that is by necessity. Some of it is that you're moving so many pieces around the chessboard. it's like, I hope you have something to show me by the time I get to your scene. We don't have time to see it 2 weeks into the rehearsal period. And sometimes it's like, no, let's go back and look at that and let's see what the stakes are. Can we make those higher? And I appreciate that because it's fluid, and it helps remind me when I'm working with you, and even to think about it that way when I direct later. Okay, there is no one specific way to get to a route. Part of it is discovering it as you go, and part of it is discovering, hey, I didn't realize I had that tool available to me.
Mhm. And I mean, it varies. I mean, speaking from director point of view, it varies from show to show. Um, for those who have worked with me in the realm of it as a director, I block very quickly.
Right.
Very quickly. I mean, I will block the entire show in a day. I mean, what? Act 2 of Company took me 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's basically just getting all the technical aspects out there. So you have the same information that I have in my head. So you basically know the basics of entrances, exits. You're over here. This is your playing area. Got it. Good. Let's move on. And then we can start to play. We can start to evolve. And because I truly believe that theater is a collaborative art form where everyone has a voice. Yes, it's the author's story, it's the director's vision, but you as actors and music directors and choreographers also have part of the story that they want to tell. And so you have to find that balance, and you have to give yourself time to play and find those things together. So,
Sure.
and I mean, I've learned that. I've taken bits and pieces through all of my education and every show that I've worked with. You can always learn something from somebody.
Right.
You just have to be open to learn it.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. So you've got this network of teachers that you're developing at OSU. Not to mention the folks that you've already come in contact with at Choctaw. You're building this network of talent at OSU, because the students that you're working with, you continue to keep relationship with them. You're building up, scene work with them, and you're also shaping kind of your fundamental base as a character actor. Which I think it's very simple to say that that's the path you're on. At this point, you're talk a little bit, just kind of outline, and I'm curious, outline for me where you're discovering your stage strengths are at this point. I know that by this time you've got a fundamental understanding of acting and you love in comedy. What else?
Basically, I was someone who kept showing up. I was always there, and I wasn't going to say no to any part, no matter how small or big. And truth be told, I love playing in the chorus of big musicals. You want me to pop out and say one funny thing, pop back in? Great. I love it. You want me to kill the dog? Great. Be the bad stripper? Sure. I love all that stuff because, I love the idea of ensemble. It's that everyone has their role to play. And it's, let me help you set this joke up. Go ahead and take it. And then it'll be my turn. And then it's so-and-so's turn. I mean, all my nerdiness, even from, I've never been a fan of one individual superhero from the Marvel or DC world because I am a big nerd. I love the aspect of the X-Men as a group, as a team. Justice League, not Superman or not just Batman. Because everyone has their strengths and everyone has their superpower. And even in an ensemble, yes, you can deliver that line wonderful, better than I can, but I can do this a little better than you. So there's the whole idea of an ensemble, and as I said, collaborative art form. I just believe that there's so much that you can learn and share. I mean, and it's more fun than, just being out there by yourself.
Right.
in my opinion. So I've learned from everyone, and I remember at OSU I was doing Virginia Woolf, and there was a moment that I was getting completely frustrated at some of the other members of the cast, because I flubbed a line, and that just turned into a big jokey, and I was trying to get through it, just trying to get through it. And the woman who played my wife, who played Martha, just under her breath just went, "Use it." And that really resonated with me. So whatever it is, whatever you are, use it, make it part of your art.
Right. Because that
So,
part of it is unique to you. You have that
yeah,
experience. You're going to be able to project it in a way that is honest and truthful. Yeah.
I am going to be me no matter what show I'm going to do, because I look like this. I can only be so much. So I have to find how myself can work its way into that character. There's the mantra of don't judge, justify your characters. It's like, oh, well, I would never do that. Well, why are they doing that? That's your question.
In addition to that, you're kind of developing these tool sets at OSU. You already have been exposed to working on stage and comedy, being part of the ensemble. You're learning dance and movement here. You're becoming a more of a dancer. You're guessing you're doing musicals. So are you singing?
In the ensemble, and that was also, it was at OSU when I also was told that singing is not part of my forte.
Sure.
To put it nicely. And those types of statements can really mess with a young person's mind, and it's something I still carry with me. So that's why I've always been so hesitant about singing. I've been told that I can't, and so I've always been just put me in the background. I'll just I'll sing whatever they're singing, whatever that is. So I was never in those musical leads because I was never encouraged in that area, and that psychology did a number on me.
Yeah.
And so I'm still working on it, but since then I've have sung in musicals and have been out front in the spotlight for those musical moments.
Which is part of the reason why I asked the question, because again, know thyself. I talk about that all the time. That's my rule number one, because you are what make you a unique storyteller, and your story is going to reflect at some point the best way to tell a specific story. It may not be the best way to tell every story. I may not think to myself, oh my goodness, I'm doing a production of Light in the Piazza. You know who we should get is Timothy Stewart. But, and we'll talk about this specifically, somebody may say, I want to do Drowsy Chaperone, and you know who I'm looking for. Or I want to do Hairspray, and you know who is the right guy for this part. And I think that's a really important lesson to share, because these people, for good or for ill, that help train us, have a profound effect on our lives as artists.
Especially when you're young and just starting out, and you're looking to these people for guidance and nurturing, and one misstep on either part can just bring the whole thing crumbling down around you.
Right. So, and that goes for us in terms of our talent. And that's not to say for any moment, and I think we both would agree, that's not to say it's invaluable to tell people the truth and to say, hey, you don't have a traditional singing voice, or you struggle with pitch, or you struggle with time. But it is also about reminding us that all of our career is an opportunity to learn and to grow. to change as artists, not to define at 18, 19, 20 years old. This is what you are. This is what you'll always be. Yeah, that's a really difficult road to set up on. So you're working from the OSU experience. You've got to make a decision about what happens after that. Take me through it.
Well, graduation was coming up on me at OSU, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And then the head of the department back then was Dr. Cox, and he said, "Hey, there's an opening for a position at grad school at Southwest Missouri State back then, but now it's just Missouri State." And he says, "You should do that." And I was like, all right. I didn't have any other plans, and I didn't know. So he helped me with, the paperwork, and he had a friend that was on the committee, or the grad school committee, whatever it was. And so he, talked to them and helped me with my application and everything like that. And I went up there and interviewed with one of the instructors, professors. And so because I was doing summer school at the same time. And so I ended summer school, and then a month later, I was in grad school. So and there was, it was a totally different setting because, undergrad, you have all your gen ed classes and everything like that, while in grad school you are just focused on your discipline, theater, music, dance, whatever it is. And so it was a totally different environment, and one that I learned a lot more there. I learned more about who I was and what I was, what interested me and fascinated me. I got into an area of performance art there in the form of personal narratives. And that's basically, writing your story and telling your story and performing that. I really found that fascinating, and basically it also encouraged more of my writing and storytelling through my writing. Through that, I wrote a personal narrative. The instructor of the performance studies area at Missouri State, Dr. Park Fuller, was gathering information and performances for a conference on HIV/AIDS education through personal narratives. And so as a gay man, I wrote my story about my fears, and from that, I mean, it ended up, we went to a conference, and all of our narratives got published in a journal. So yay, published there. And it just sort of created a whole new spark for me in the realm of storytelling.
I'm curious, was that an easier story? Well, maybe let's back up first of all. Being able to tell a personal narrative about your concerns as a gay man. First of all, was that an easier story to tell in graduate school in Southwest Missouri State? Was that a story that you kind of figured out before then? Had you kind of put it into a clarity?
I came out some in OSU, but not really until grad school. It was a different time. And still trying to figure out who I am and what I didn't want to be pigeonholed in, gay roles or things like that.
Sure. And we have a way of doing that in theater.
But once grad school happened, I was able to, the narrative part was easy for me to just tell my story and write it in a way, writing in my voice, because I can hear how I would say it.
Mm.
And I was able to, put the commas and the periods and the ellipses where they needed to be, bold this word, italicize that word. So when you're even reading it, you can hear the voice that I'm saying it in.
Right.
So it came, I guess, somewhat naturally for me.
Yeah. Well, and I asked that because, there is all of this discussion right now about diversity in our art and inclusion in our art. But I think it's very important for us to remind ourselves that we've not always, our community has not always been at the front of this fight. We've not always been really good advocates and really good allies, and that's any of us. That's the nature of growing. There is a long time where, well, he can't play that straight role because he's a gay guy. He can't be a romantic lead because he's heavier. He can't be that romantic lead because he's black. Whatever it is. And I was really curious about that and how you found your particular way of telling that story, because full disclosure, you and I know each other's personal stories. So navigating that in the real world, navigating it with parents, navigating it within our careers, that's not necessarily an easy road. And I think our audience, particularly our young artists, I want them to know that. I want them to understand that it's not easy for anybody. Even if the environment is different today, it doesn't mean it's going to be any easier for you to find a way to tell your story.
I think one thing that made it easier is that the realm of the theater community is already so diverse, and so they're so accepting of who you are as an individual, and that it makes it easier for you to come out of that shell and have your own voice. Yes, and even nowadays, stereotyping and typecasting is still part of the culture. And, we do what we can, and we always try to have that open-mindedness to cast differently. And you try to strive that, and you want to hire the best person for that role. And so it's just an effort to be better.
Yeah. To do better work, to be a better advocate, to be a better voice. Yeah, absolutely. And I think of multiple occasions where I've sat next to you in an audition room, and we've both thought, well, you'll say, Doug Forward, that's the guy. He's the guy for this part. Maybe that's not the way we see it in our mind because somebody's told us we should see it differently. But is there one reason why that's not the guy for you? And you're going to go, yeah, you're right. Or Charlie Minot is the dentist, or,
Yeah, and that's, because, everyone thinks the dentist is supposed to be, the big, tough Orange Scrivello. But the role of the dentist is he plays a multitude of different characters. And, and so I was looking for someone who could be not just the dentist. He plays, all of the agents and, the customers that come in and a bum at one point. So you need someone that's versatile. So it's, know what's in the box before you can think outside of it. So
right. As you're working at Southwest Missouri State University, Go Bears, you got you got a pretty notable group of alumni that you are listed among, in addition to John Goodman, Kathleen Turner, Don Davis, Kendrick Castlebaum, Timothy Stewart. You guys are all yes, absolutely. You guys are all coming from this program in the middle of America. It is not the coast. It is a flyover state, as it were, but you're developing this personal narrative. You're developing stories about your fears as a gay man, and this is the early 90s, where you're telling this story and kind of figuring out the voice. So it's not isolated to the coast that you can have these stories. In fact, maybe it's a little more difficult, but you're doing it and it's shaping you. I want to talk a little bit about how that, again, helps you find your personal courage to, I guess, bring life and bring voice to what is going to be this character actor, but also what is a gay man from the middle of the country that is expressing his ideas in art, and art that is for the what is the word I'm looking for? Is for the heartland value, because that's your audience. Your audience is the heartland of America, but you're still finding a way to voice that, because that's a thing that continues for you in your career. You do a lot of that. Where does that come from? This desire to just, I want to tell you the story, even though you don't recognize it.
It was at Southwest Missouri State that idea in the realm of personal narratives and performance art made me start to think outside the box and think of different things. Yes, we did, the big main stage shows, and that's where I first did Little Shop and Leader of the Pack and farces like No Sex Please We're British. But we also did some more experimental Peter Brook's Conference of the Birds, and there was that whole aspect of they had a children's theater department, and as well as the performance studies. So it wasn't just limited to one type of theater of what you can and can't do. I was offered so many different avenues and paths, and it was just like a kid in a candy store, just trying to, you want to take a little bit of everything, but you're drawn towards one aspect or another. I was also there that I had a wonderful teacher and now great friend of Cheryl Miller, who, that's where more of my dancing aspect came through, because I was never a trained dancer. I was a big guy who could move, and I could lift the girl over my head.
Yeah.
And that was, and to this day, that's what I do. I'm a big guy who can move, and I can lift someone over my head.
Jack, not named, Jack Job.
Jack Job. That's right. And so, I mean, and that's fine. I like that. I mean, I bring it on. Not the musical, but just do it. I mean, I enjoyed doing that. And so it wasn't, the eclecticness of the education just became part of me. I love the dancing of the musical. I love the storytelling in performance art, or even now I've sort of gotten away from that aspect of performance art, but now the idea of storytelling is, what you strive to do in every role as an actor, or every story that you tell as a director. You just want to tell the story the best way you can. And that's what I try to do.
And I think it was a point worth noting, because in addition to that, you're forming this idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you didn't have to go somewhere else to do it. You didn't have to leave your kind of heartland roots to be able to tell diverse stories. You were getting that at OU and being able to work your way through, well, how do I tell the story of a gay man and his fears about HIV, and how can I write, which would come to return into your life time and time and time again? How could I help develop early beginning works, and which you did with our dear friend Robin Masson, and you kind of worked with new plays in that sense. And while there's value, obviously, and much to be lauded in all of our comrades who have gone off to New York or who've worked in these different locations, that kind of work wasn't exclusive to leaving. It didn't. You can only do it there.
And I have a lot of friends who have moved off to Chicago and New York and LA and stuff, and that I still talk to, and they say, once in a while, come out here and do something, and that'd be great. But I don't have that need to, because I'm happy with the work that I do here at the Pollard, because I think we do quality work here, and we tell great stories. We don't have the big budgets, but we tell the stories, and our audiences seem to enjoy it. And so I don't need the drive of going to the big city to become rich and famous.
Right.
'Cause I'm never going to be that. Rich or famous.
I
I'm
don't know
just
that
gonna
that's true, but your passion for telling the story.
Not gonna happen.
All right. But your passion for telling the story is what resonates most with me, and it's one of the reasons why time and time again I say, okay, Timothy's got to do this because it's a unique story and it speaks in his voice. So tell me just a little bit about you're setting this early foundation, just a little bit about Gettysburg the musical.
Okay. Graduated from grad school, and again, didn't know what I was gonna do. I never know till it happens. And then we found auditions because SMSU is in Springfield, Missouri, and Branson is just 30, 45 minutes to the south. And I already had a lot of friends that were down there dancing in shows and singing in shows down there, and it was a good gig. And my friend Dara and I think Tara was there. Just a few of us decided to go down and found this audition for Gettysburg the musical. And I went and auditioned, and I got the role. Ended up getting the role of Colonel Emery and ensemble. A small role, but I mean, I did have a dream ballet. So I was able to, do some more dancing. There was a tap number in there. Tapping's not my strongest suit, so I did okay with it. But put me in the background for those. But again, lift a girl over my head, right there. So, and not probably the best art of literature or theater, but it was good money. And Branson, good money.
Yeah.
And it's when that show closed, 6 months, 5 months, however long later, that it was just like, okay, again, don't know what I'm gonna do.
Right.
And that's when it's like, okay, Mom, I think I'm gonna come home and move back home for a while.
Right.
And that's what I did.
You come back home to Oklahoma. You're waiting tables, yeah.
Waited tables for a few years.
The classic fallback for us.
Substitute taught for about a year. But I moved back home, and I knew that of the Pollard then, and I went up and with a month of me moving back home, I went and just took an old headshot and resume up and met with Donna Dixon and just sort of introduced myself. And she told me, I think at that point y'all were in rehearsals or running Voice of the Prairie. And we talked about that a little bit, and that was my introduction to the Pollard, of meeting Donna Dixon. Y'all were still doing like construction in the lobby. There was like white plastic or clear plastic sheets all over.
Right, they were redoing the lobby,
and the offices were upstairs in the
inn.
Yeah.
So. And we had auditions coming up at that time for My Fair Lady.
And I showed up for that.
Yeah. And later that year, we would actually audition for You Can't Take It With You, which you also did. You got My Fair Lady, you auditioned for You Can't Take It With You, and you got Donald, which is a non-traditional piece of casting, to be sure. But I often think about that story and think to myself, you were actually more like Mr. DePinna, who in that play arrives at the Westerhoff house and decides to stay, decides to make this place his home because he feels the connection and he knows that he can thrive here. And that was kind of the story that is Timothy Stewart. You came to Pollard, you did My Fair Lady, you continued to work in other locations, you continue to do that still, but you kind of made Pollard home.
I was, make the joke. It's like, I'm the guy that just keeps showing up.
Yeah.
You just keep showing up. Oh, Vanessa needs help in the prop department. Sure, I'll come up. I have some time. I'll help. And you need someone help on the crew. Sure, I'll do it. And you're there. You're working hard, and so you get the small role here and the chorus here, and then hey, you learn something there, and you keep evolving. And sorry, my cat's screaming. So you just keep coming, and then eventually you pay your dues, which believe it or not, something you gotta do.
Right.
And you eventually, few years later, position became available and became a company member.
Right. And that's because you kept showing up.
Just kept showing up.
Well,
Hard work.
Yeah. I ask you to tell me a little bit about that experience, because I think it's different, or it's fair to say that it's different. Actors love audiences, and you played obviously in front of audiences in Branson and Stillwater, and you worked at Lyric, and you went to Erders, and you do all this different stuff, and you have all these different experiences with audiences, but a lot of times it's one and done. You're interacting with that audience and then no more. And the Pollard is unique and almost like a television show in that you're developing a relationship with an audience over a long period of time. They start to recognize you. They start to, your bag of tricks is accessible and available to the audience. And they can call you on it. That was a lot like what you did in this show.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that experience, as far as the difference between being part of a resident company and then gigging around and doing shows.
I was pleasantly surprised. Like one time, just in the past year, I was helping Jennifer in the box office, taking tickets, and and the response that people, oh, I loved you in such and such. Oh, you were great in that. Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, because usually I don't hear that stuff. I mean, I do my role. I take the bow. I go out and I go home. So you don't get to hear that level of expression from the audience all the time. You get the applause or whatever at the end of a show
in the character bit, and you're not getting to see that as the character actor.
And it's always nice to have those regular fans that keep coming back and still enjoy what you're doing. And it is difficult in, okay, well, I did this laugh in one show, and and so I got to find a different way. Oh, I did that walk and such. So it does get to a cerebral point in the aspect of you're trying to think and overthink, and gotta, it turns technical in that aspect. And then you do have those roles that you delve from the heart and create a nice piece of work that means something to you. And it may not be the wacky funny one that gets that immediate response, but you do a nice heartfelt scene like Miracle Worker, and you're able to tell a story.
What I find compelling is, much like what you've done a lot of your career, is you find a different location and connect to a different part of your artistry. At Choctaw, you're being introduced. At OSU, you're discovering yourself as, hey, I like comedy. I like to be part of the ensemble. I want to learn how to do the basics of dance. At Missouri, you're developing your work as a narrative storyteller, as both a writer and an artist who is focused in on kind of the difficult story and ways to tell it in your specific voice. At Pollard, you're using those skills as an actor. Obviously, it's such a diverse body of work. You're having to do a little bit of this and props management and this kind of thing. But at Pollard, you're really starting to find your voice as a director, as the guy behind the show.
Yeah. Um, it, doing so many different roles as an actor and doing so many different productions, you start to get a feel of it. I took, directing 1, directing 2 in college, and did, directed this thing in college. But it wasn't until Pollard that our first show that we directed together was Into the Woods.
Mhm.
And I was able to picture the whole thing in my head. And I mean, as a director, that's one of the first things I do, because I mainly direct the musicals, and I'll listen to the CD or cast album of something, and if I can hear and picture a song, how this one is done on stage, and inspires me. I mean, I will see it in my head, and that's where I go, start with that. That inspires me. I see it in my head. I can picture it here. And then now I start to look at the production aspect of it and see what is limited to our stage. How can I put it on our stage? And looking at the whole picture. And so you're not just, as director, as actors, you have your role and you're focused on that role. But as director, you have to look at the big picture. And in our environment, it's not just the artistic side. We also have to look at the business side of it.
What's the cost?
And we have to, what's my budget? Who can I afford? I can't use so-and-so, but this other person worked just as well. So, you do have those moments of concession, of balancing the business and the show. So you look at all aspects, from the business side, the technical side, and the artistic side. So it's not just, you created this person acting this scene. It's all the elements that go along with it.
Exactly. Well, and we could obviously sit around and list your directing work, but show to show, you're different. Show to show, you work differently. You work with different people. Budget allows you to work with different people. I'm much more interested in talking to you about the universal thing about you as a director, and that's the environment you try to create when you're working with cast members. To this day, cast members walk in our building for a first day of rehearsals, and some of them literally leap into your arms. They're so ready to go to work and to work with you. They're so excited.
I'm a hugger.
You are a hugger. But I think you also create an environment where that's okay. And that people are excited about the work they're going to do, even if you're going to block it in 45 minutes, an act. They know there's going to be a depth of the piece, which is why you're able to get the artist you're able to get. Most notably, I'm watching you develop the cast of Company, and I'm looking around me and going, holy smokes. This show's great, but these people are coming because they're gonna put in the work with this particular director. What's your approach to creating an environment as a director?
Well, I mean, it goes back to, it's a play, so let's play. And we also want to create an environment that it is safe to play. It is okay to mess up, fuck up, whatever, and you're still going to be okay. It's your chance to make those bold choices and have fun. It may not be the right one, and that's one thing I say on the first day. It's like, play, have fun, think outside the box. If you want to try this character with a peg leg, go for it, try it. I'll probably say no. But we never know. And that's when we did like Harvey Korman night,
right.
For Love Perfect Change, we were doing that show. We did it as part of our signature series piece, and then we brought it back as part of our regular season. And same 4 actors, same set and everything. So we didn't need all of our rehearsal time per se to get it back on its feet. And so we had what I came up with as Harvey Korman night, which is make each other laugh and have fun, but make sure it's in the realm of the character. Make sure it fits into your character. Some of it may work, some of it may not. Most of it did not, but it gave you a fresh perspective, and it gave you a moment to play. And that's why we all really got into this business, is something that we're passionate about and have fun with and love to do. And if you make it all, oh, you have to work and block here, stand here, do this, that takes a lot of the fun out of it.
Right.
And as far as I know, we got this one life to go through, and you gotta have fun while you do.
Yeah. Well, and as to your credit, I remember doing that piece, and I don't know who told you this, or if anybody told you this. I don't think that I did. That idea of the Harvey Korman night was almost crippling. The day or two before, it's coming up. It's coming. We're never going to do it. And we know what the notion is, and you're nervous because you're like, oh my God, I got to be funny. The ultimate goal is I've got to do something funny that's not here, and blah, blah, blah. And so you're kind of panicked about it. But what I discovered really quickly is, because I was working with this group of people that I respect greatly, and majority of my scenes were, they're all broken up, but these other 4 actors, Stephanie Forte, who I adore, and Jake DiTomaso, who I'm just incredibly fond of as a stage partner, and Becky Woolridge. We're all on stage, and we're all super safe together. We know each other really well. And you're saying to us, one, don't try to entertain me, try to entertain each other, try to find new life in it. And it opened me up in ways that I hadn't expected before. And it was actually a benefit to my show, because I saw it differently. I didn't see it as the same pieces before. I thought, oh, there's room here for the laugh, or this is a sketch that really works if you do this. And I wouldn't have done that myself as a director. No way. No way I would have done that. But as an actor, I was freed up completely because of it. So I completely get that. And I'm grateful for it, that you provide.
And it makes you look at things in a different light. And, it gives you it may not, the entire gimmick or bit that you did for that one scene may not work for the entire thing, but your line reading on that one line was better. I like that. Let's try that. Keep that. It's just, you got to go through any path or any door you can to find what works. And there is no one set answer, so you got to explore them all.
Absolutely. You with everything from Bring It On, the musical, and Company, like we discussed, you obviously directed Passing Strange and Altar Boys. You directed the Vagina Monologues, which was just a riveting piece of theater from start to finish. You directed the state premiere of Rent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Did you forget about that? Did
you? Hey, no, I know I did Rent. I just forgot it was the state premiere.
So I mean, you took that gift as a storyteller, and all of this you're finding through your habit of showing up, of being around, and you're continuing to make strides. I want to talk a little bit before we get out of here about your work as both writer and muse when it comes to development of new works, because you've written and helped the writing of our good friend Robert Manson. You worked on pieces with him. You've gone on to continue to write for yourself, and including a book that you just wrote and just published this last year. Where did writing find its way? I mean, obviously you found it in college, but how does it find its way back into your narrative?
Well, I was writing, since high school, and it was usually just a monologue, a story that I could tell, that I could perform. I mentioned Elmer, and then, there was also Butch, the gay aerobics instructor. It was, wacky comedy that I could perform at benefits or skits or different occasions. And then it wasn't until coming to work at the Pollard, and Robert he had written play. It was, oh God, he's going to kill me because I can't think of the name of the first one. It was The Playground. Oh, Playground. Hello. Yeah. So it was Playground. And we did that. And then we did another script of his called Drama Queens. And then we started, I don't know how Tales from the Closet came about, but it was part of the Out Art Festival, because they were going to do an art section, a theater section, a music section. And we were doing the theater section, and he was combining all these scripts and monologues into one evening of work, which came to be Tales from the Closet. And I wrote a couple, sketches for that, because, sketch comedy. Right. I love the comedy. Right. And so I wrote 3, I think, for that one, 3 or 4. And so that began my development in those. I haven't written like a long play or anything. Mainly it's just a bunch of monologues and stuff like that. And then as for the book, how that came about was, every year we do Christmas Carol. Right. And in the green room is one of the young cast members, Gracie, and her mom were writing their letter to Santa that year. And they were going to go see Santa at the mall. And I don't know how the wording of how she wasn't for sure, Santa's in every mall, and she didn't know if that was the real Santa or not. And that made me ask me the question of, why is there a Santa in every mall, and how would you explain that to young people? And I had other questions that children would ask in that realm. And I started writing the story of what I pictured it would be and how that would came about. And, it took me 7 years to create the final project. But, and I finally got to a point, it's like, you know what? I think I want to just publish this and get it out in the world. And so I did.
Love it. Excuse me.
You can find it on Amazon.
Exactly. You got to learn how to plug your stuff, man.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So what is the advice that you're giving to the guy who wants to be Timothy Stewart, that wants to write, that wants to show up? What is the advice?
And that's it, is show up, do the work, keep plugging away at it. It's not always going to be easy, but you're always going to learn something. Don't be so centered on yourself that you can't look at what is happening around you, that you can't learn from someone else. And play, because if you're not having fun, then it's not worth it. You got to enjoy what you do. There's a saying of, do what you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. Right. So play, have fun.
I think that's awesome. As is our want on Plugged In, we end this thing with the Bernard Pivot Bouillon de Couture questionnaire. So let's start with, what is your favorite word, Timothy Stewart?
Joy.
And your least favorite word?
Arrogance.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
People. You can learn so much from them. It's part of the joy. People.
I would not have predicted that answer in a million years, but I love it. What turns you off?
Evilness, meanness, people who are just not nice. I just, I don't like people who are mean. And it comes with the word arrogance. If you have arrogance, you better have something to back it up. But most of the time, people don't.
I get that. What's your favorite curse word?
That's Sophie's choice. You gotta love fuck. But I mean, in my head, horse shit. Because that was my Gigi's, and every time she says it, I say it, I can hear her voice saying it of horse shit.
A person I adore.
But gotta love fuck.
Yeah. What sound or noise do you love?
Laughter.
That's a given. What sound or noise do you hate?
The sound of pain, like in a friend or in a child, or for me, it's mainly my pets. Whenever they're in pain and the sound of their crying, and you can't help.
Yeah.
You don't know. They can't communicate to you, and you can't. It's that helplessness.
Ugh.
And so the sound of pain. I also hate the sound of styrofoam being squished together. But that's superficial.
I mean that one's a good one. That's what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Like an artisan, of creator, of a baker of breads, or crafter of fine furniture. I want to be able to create still, and so it would be an artisan of some type.
Okay.
Make that perfect loaf of crunchy bread, or make that perfectly stained desk or something that sits in the corner.
And anybody who knows you knows that you're pretty big artisan when it comes to kitchen bacon.
Yeah.
Yes. Cheesecakes and pizzas and oh my. And what profession would you not want to do?
Astronaut or submarine worker. I don't like being in a confined space when even out there you can't breathe. So if you up in space, you can't breathe. Some little hole. No, under the water, you can't breathe out there. So no, I'm not claustrophobic. I don't mind small spaces, but being with the knowledge that I can't breathe out there scares the shit out of me.
That would be some horse shit.
That was some horse shit.
Finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Really? You? Okay. Everyone's waiting at the bar, so come on. Or, wait, you're not done yet.
Like that. So I'm glad that we got to sit down and talk, and I'm glad that it was I'm glad that it went the way it did, because I think something I'm always impressed with you about, and I learned a little bit from you every time I'm in an artistic setting with you, is that you never fail to show up. I don't just mean as far as being at the Pollard. I mean, you never fail to show up for your actors. You never fail to show up for the company. What can I do? I mean, you've jobs that I thought he's never going to say yes to this. Even Hairspray, which terrified you greatly, and yet I mentioned it once, and then you spent the next half of the year driving back and forth, listening to that soundtrack and working on how to. You just never fail to show up. You never fail to show up for your bringing on actors when you ask them to do incredible stunts and and you never fail to show up for the Guthrie community and for the acting community in Oklahoma City, whether it be showing up in a production of Sound of Music at Lyric, or going back to your alma mater and doing The Drowsy Chaperone. You show up at the arts festivals with Robert when Robert's doing plays in his garage and creating the first web series before web series were a thing.
Were a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never failed to show up, my friend. And I'm so grateful that you don't.
Yeah, because if you don't show up, then they might realize they can do it without you. We don't. No one wants that to happen.
No. But I think it's more likely that they'd go, you miss a big spark without Timothy Stewart in the room, and I'm grateful for it.
Oh, shucks.
Thank you, man.
I love you.
I love you.
I am Timothy Stewart. I am an artist, and I am plugged in.